in stories, right?
No, now we're owned by the New York Times, so we got.
Oh, shoot, that's right. Okay, yeah, now the rule changed back.
Fuck.
I am a big cusser in the old Substack, so
I saw it. I read some of them.
yeah, I use it freely. So
we're live on YouTube.
It's fun to be able to write like you speak.
Exactly. I wish I could.
To you folks on YouTube.
Hi, guys.
You may or may not recognize the third guy here with us this morning, but let me get this.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Time to get rolling on the Zoom.
Yeah.
Now I got to do the official podcast / radio voice. Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. That's a mouthful. It is Thursday, June the 13th, a little after 9 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe. The bottom of the Brady Bunch square here is Scott Docterman from The Athletic, and a special guest, top left corner, is Mark Morehouse from Parts Unknown.
Hello.
Mark, thanks for joining us. We had a really good conversation before we started recording, and tough luck, folks. You're never going to know what we said.
Promises in the old content world. I don't miss that, honestly.
Well, as we always said, the best podcasts were either going to the game or coming away from the game, and those would have been ones that we could have charged for back in the day.
All the filters were dropped, man.
Well, I think it's appropriate to have Mark on at this time of year because we often refer to this portion of the calendar year for people who cover Iowa sports with the moniker that Mark came up with, which is
Horse Latitudes, guys.
Horse Latitudes.
And we're dead ass deep in it right now.
That's stolen from a Doors song, and basically it's where the ocean really doesn't have a drift, and that's summer. I mean, after hockey playoffs, we're stuck with what the All-Star game in baseball. Let's face it, none of us. I mean, when we were 12 and they were wearing all different uniforms, it was great. When the Expos were in, it was great. Now it's like, what does it even mean? It sounds like there's some sort of advantage, whatever. Horse Latitudes, you guys know. And then, I think the favorite thing I did was top 40 players. What I should have done was, hey, what's everybody's favorite sports movie? I should have done that.
That was our COVID go-to at The Athletic. Yeah. We did a lot of sports movie stuff. In fact, I did one where it was, we wrote the next level of Carl Spackler story.
Oh, God.
And I had him, after he blew it up, joining the Gophers or joining the Badgers program. Then he found out they were playing the Gophers, so he bombed their locker room. So we had some fun then. That was
oh yes, it's a lot of times it's a story that people didn't think they wanted and that they love.
Exactly. Or Jimmy's Chitwood marrying the town sweetheart and leaving college because he couldn't leave Hickory.
I would have done Slapshot and
Hanson
Florida
Brothers
thing. I would have had him go to Florida, and now look at what Florida's going to win the Stanley Cup. So
yeah, there's something.
I just think Reggie Dunlop's somewhere in the spirit of Reggie Dunlop's in there somewhere.
Florida, the state of Florida, winning Stanley Cups, and I'm an Islanders fan who, it's been a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mike Bossy's not coming back on the ice.
Brian Trottier,
Pat LaFontaine.
Let's see, he looks great. He looks like he can still play.
Long live Chico Resch. Yes. I just got a text from our middle child who just asked why everybody's mean to Caitlyn. So we'll get to that in the podcast, why everybody's mean to Caitlyn. That's certainly something we'll get to, but I think it's appropriate. There's nothing that hard hitting on the Iowa beat right now. Although Scott and I have mentioned this, Mark, it is more of a year round than it used to be now with NIL and the transfer portal. So those times where we had a little time to just kind of chill, fewer of those now, which I guess is good in a way because it fuels engagement for people wanting to know that Iowa got the 5th, 6th string wide receiver from Northwestern in the transfer portal or whatever it was, and that creates something. But still, I sit here usually till about 11 or noon working, and then I can see my garden out here out the window. I'm out there weeding, man, and watering the garden and playing with it because I got to get out of the house this time of year. So
Yeah.
that's that's important. But you left the business what almost 4 years ago now,
Yeah.
and talk a little bit before we started recording. And I think with most changes in life, there are at least some what ifs, regrets, however strongly you want to frame it. You said you have some of those.
Oh yeah.
Would you like to share what you miss about being around Scott and I?
I miss the challenge of content, you know, just something that engages me, something that engages you. I miss hitting that connection. I really do. Because when you write a good story, you want to talk about it. You just do. I mean, when you write something you're proud of, and you know when you write something you're proud of, it's not usually a Tuesday after Kirk's deal. And those things where you just shit them out. I'm sorry,
Fart
guys.
fart them out like a burrito is what you always say.
There's not a lot of crafting going on a Tuesday. It's like, fuck this, let's just do it. But so this is the time of year where I would have been really sweating a home visit. I would have really have gone, and I hate to say this, but I really put a lot of like thought into who I talked to. I wanted to kind of have a spectrum of players. So if I were able to kind of just filter out everything else, get through all the other bullshit, and get to that and make that good, then I thought it was a successful summer. I think I did it for 22 years. And I think I did 8 of those. So I didn't have a lot of great successful summers, but something like that, just something that kind of fuels you, kind of fuels the inner reporter or just the inner storyteller too. You know, just something like that. Finding something like that, but a lot of the what I really don't miss when the Hawkeyes are in the midst of shitting the bed in the third quarter when the emails start. Those first fucking emails, man, they were like I feel stress in the base of my neck anymore. I can figure that out. They were like, oh my God, there it is. Oh, there's another one. Oh God damn. Oh, so stuff, you don't miss that, but you miss the crafting. You really do. And in the podcast, goddamn, that was fun. And I only had to show up with the phone. Scott showed up with the work. I did the phone stuff. So I missed that. And I missed that connection. The podcast was a lot of fun.
And answered 1,800 questions from Trip.
That's the other thing.
Mad Fro.
I wish I wouldn't have read so many damn podcast questions on the podcast.
I know sometimes we're answering the same one 5 ones later. And
yeah, it's like, so that could have been taken care of with one good producer.
Yeah.
Who did more than just turn it on. Sorry, Nate. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you'll be happy to know that Scott and I have carried on that tradition of having really no direction on these podcasts, or very little direction. We come up like I did at the opening, and I come up with some headlines and we start there, but oftentimes we just meander around and get into discussion. But that's the best way to have discussion, I think, is just kind of free rolling and using what comes to mind, and we all have, institutional knowledge. I think that's important too from background here. And I used to really enjoy, Mark, when they let you go. I remember you went to Jersey to do a story on Albert Young, during the summer, things like that. That a lot of that stuff, Scott and his folks at the Athletic still do things like that, but for the most part, we don't see that stuff as much.
So I stole that idea from Bud Withers. He was a sports writer I want to say he covered the Washington Huskies for the Seattle Times Intelligencer, maybe. And anyway, so I saw a story he did. He went and did a visit with a kid from LA who played for Washington. And I'm like, hey, I can do that. And so that's something that I really look forward to. And it was something that was extra, so that's always the hard part. And I know you guys do this too. And the one thing I have written about on the Substack is how incredibly competitive our business is and how that does drive you. And you want to be a different voice. You want to bring people in different ways, and finding those extra things, the home interview, the one-on-one with Kirk, which, I had to withdraw from that race. But anyway, I just think those
there aren't many of those anymore anyway.
you know what?
Yeah.
I could tell by the amount of cussing has gone up in Kirk's interviews, and so I imagine he probably would rather be sitting on the electric chair with somebody somebody throwing darts at the lever. So yeah, he doesn't want to do that. I mean, he never did. Let's be honest. But yeah, so those extra things, like a good podcast or somebody you can talk to, like this type of deal here, those types of entertainment things. It's not always hardcore journalism. I mean, sometimes it is entertainment, and sometimes, it is sports, and you want to laugh and have fun with it.
It's harder on Tuesdays too, Scott. I think you would agree with this. Tuesdays and Saturdays since COVID, like we used to, after games, we had the separate room, like Kirk would do his main press conference and we'd be over in a adjacent room talking to players, and you could get some good stuff. You get some after the game, fresh stuff. That's gone. They do the podium now with the players. We don't get any one-on-one opportunities other than Tuesdays. And those, Scott, aren't really one-on-one opportunities with everybody there. The amount of media there are now, it's really hard to do anything in those settings. So you really have to do what Mark is talking about and think outside of the box.
Yeah, you can't. If you want to be a pack journalist in this day and age in this field, you're dead. I mean, because everybody already knows everything. Everybody's going to tweet the news, and unless you write like Hemingway or Morehouse for that matter, you're kind of fucked. Then it's like, well, what can I bring differently? Well, in my case, I have dead trees here that I try to stack with stats that are through the yin yang, so that way I can throw something out there that's got some different flavor. I'm blessed to work at a place now where it's not like, hey, like where Mark and I were at before, where it's you've got to do something every single freaking day, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, it's the 8th week of the football season and they're bringing the same guys out for Tuesday. And what am I going to scrape together here is for a story, or basketball, which is 3 times worse because there's no news or no interesting anecdotes there by the midway through the season.
And the season lasts forever in basketball.
Exactly. But you're right. Like one of the more successful things Mark got accomplished for a brief period of time was on Tuesdays, we had the split at the foyer. You had the TV people on one level, you had voice people on the other, and that kept everybody kind of separate so they could get their sound bites, we could get our depth. But in today's world, which is different than even 15 years ago, like with Mark and I back then, you could kind of steer some people away from the pack and talk to them on the side. You got to know them a little more face to face. Now there'll be 8 or 9 people around, and everybody's got their iPhone out and taking video, and so everybody's watching themselves. And the players today are every bit as awesome as they were then. They are awesome young men and women, and when we're talking women's basketball, and getting to know them has been fantastic. They're so much freer now than they were 4 or 5 years ago with Twitter, or just with everything they want to say and do. You can see the relaxed atmosphere, but at the same time, putting them at the podium on after games, it just doesn't do any of us any good. We're just basically, everybody's got the same story, and we're all just trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to write this that's different than everybody else?
And trying to write something different. I mean, as you said, people have their phones out. I mean, the any news or anything interesting is out there immediately. So then you have to go back and say, how am I going to write something here? And it's challenging, but it is the landscape now. And that's why I think it is good to diversify podcasts, feature stories, analysis, columns. Those are the types of things I think that are more attractive and engaging to the consumer now, rather than just, hey, here's a preview of tomorrow's game and here's a game story. It's harder to craft that game story. You have to go in a different direction. And I think, Mark, you kind of did that. Your game stories were less kind of like meat and potatoes. It had the information, but it was more creative. And I think that gets harder, I think, for young journalists to do.
It's really hard because where's your training? If you're trained to be a newspaper reporter, Well, you have a set silo where, hey, you got to report the news, you got to break the news, you got to keep up on the news. So the news is kind of driving you. And then, where can I be creative? Where can I entertain? So I always kind of guide it, inform, entertain. And game stories. Remember, there was a and Scott, I know you guys remember, but there was a time where the game story was like on the endangered species list, and people wanted to so get away from him and so get rid of him. At that time, I was like, "Fuck it, we're going to make this fun. We're going to write like a comic book, and the game is an epic thing in its own, and let's just have fun with that realm. Throw the stats, throw the record in, and then fuck it. Whatever else happens from there, entertain people because they're all seeing it. They're all seeing it. You're not going to surprise anybody. Hey, Iowa won 17-14. Yeah, they already know. So they already know who had the big stop. They already know who had the interception. They already know who fumbled. Blah blah blah. From there, you just kind of make it. You got to make it a story. And when I say story, I mean story. I mean something you tell your grandkids, something you tell something you want to wow people with. And so in newspapers, that voice is really tamped down. And Scott, you guys know, you guys both worked in newspapers. To me, the voicing, and one of the things when I walked away from it I was really frustrated with was I wasn't able to be my voice, and I had to be Iowa beat writer guy. And man, that T-shirt gets real tight after 22 years. So, it just at some point you just hope that you can beam out, and I kind of use a Substack for that. But man, so the newspaper training, it doesn't embrace the entertainment part of what our business is.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, when it comes to game stories these days, and it's almost more of a matter of do it in quick hit fashion than than 15 to 18 inches of here's what happened. I mean, nobody cares. Everybody said, as you said, everybody's already watched that game. They already know who scored the touchdown, or they already know, but you want to tell them the why and the how, and do it, pull it out, analyze it, focus it, entertain version. It's like, here's the big play of the game. Here's what the guard did to spring the running back, or here's what the defensive, how the defensive tackle two-gapped and forced the pocket up, which allowed the quarterback not to step into the throw, which meant it sailed, which is why Desmond King intercepted it and returned it for a touchdown. That's the stuff that people need and want now, not just hey, here's the Iowa won 17-14. Now they're 5-3, and they'll be facing Northwestern next week. I mean, that's stuff that, it's dead in the water. So, sorry to interrupt you, Rob, but I was just
and I was gonna ask Mark kind of what his process has been like from the summer of 2020, which we all lived through, and I think would agree was the toughest time in my career. I won't speak for you guys. It was just emotional, draining. I felt guilt in a way for things that went on when I was covering the team, all of those things. I've slowly been able to kind of talk to people, come to terms with that, and kind of moved on and found kind of a niche. I'm not a beat writer anymore because of what happened in the summer of 2020. I kind of had job roles decreased. So I'm more of an independent contractor now. So I have a better feel for that. But I wonder from Mark kind of what the recovery process was like for that. And I'm not saying we're digging ditches or anything major like that, but it was emotional to go through. And I know all three of us went through different emotions, but just kind of how you've gotten to this point, what you're doing now, and are you good, man? Are you in a good place?
Yeah, I feel pretty good, but you guys are right. I mean, if you look at it, so the Gazette had us sports writers on Monday morning. For my day was Monday morning. I had to gather local COVID news. So I did that for about 3 months, or actually, I think, 3 to 6 months. So, and then you're not in the newsroom. And so you don't have any other voices. So you're just kind of going through it. And then, Iowa had its problems with race, and that kind of compounded. And that's all, you're all handling that alone with no no really input from the newsroom because the newsroom's scattered. I mean, no one's in there anymore. I remember the last time I saw Halas, I think I was in there to download a podcast. I said, "Hey man, this is it. I'll catch you later." So that was kind of about it. And then what Rob says, it was pretty emotional. One thing that I kind of realized that I was going through burnout, and that was really, I still, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not seeing a psychologist, but I'm pretty sure that was burnout. And I want to say there's a low level PTSD that goes along with that. Being in front of a keyboard now for me is not. I like to spend a lot of time with that because I've spent a lot of time doing that. So there was a little bit of that, but for the most part, the pandemic really changed things. I went from living in a suburb in Fairfax, Iowa, commuting to work every day down in Iowa City to living in the woods, real quiet like. So I still don't know what is the best thing, but I do know that I'm a bud tender at a dispensary here in Galena, and I love it. It's fun. For the most part, here's my sports engagement anymore. Someone comes in with a Hawkeye or a Wisconsin. This is kind of a mixed area, this part of Illinois. You once in a while will see an Illinois fan in the wild, but those are few and far between. It's Hawkeye land here. And anytime, it kind of shows me the personality. Hawkeye fans the offense has changed them. Kirk's offense has changed them. They expect misery and they hope for light. And it's kind of fun seeing that on the total complete fan end of things, because everything everybody writes is kind of true. I mean, if you're a beat writer of any sort of stripe, and if you have any sort of audience, you're writing the truth. And sometimes you write it in a colorful way that makes people laugh or pisses them off. So that's still happening. That exchange is still happening. Fans still read it, and if you guys, they have the same feelings that we do. It's pretty amazing to kind of see that. It's kind of fun.
I would say that you getting out about the time you did was probably the best thing for your sanity, because going through the offensive situation the last few years and the Brian Ferentz, and he's coming back, and then it was as difficult as 2020 has been, from about the midpoint of 21 through Brian's situation was prolonged. And even though the other situation was so much more important, that this one was consistent. In the off season, if you would write something about quarterback or offensive line, well, it doesn't matter if Brian's calling the plays. That was really the entire epic of all interaction, and over and over. And then, of course, you talk about the emails when they were losing or not even playing well. The last couple of years, when you're talking about winning 7-3 against South Dakota State with 2 safeties and a field goal, you could only imagine what that was like the last 2 years. It was misery doesn't go far enough, because we're stuck. We're not calling the plays.
They tried to Kaiser Sosa you guys into everybody. I mean, everybody into thinking, yeah, you know what? You don't need offense. You don't need it. Let's just skip that part. And do remember that Kirk did at one point. He had Micah Hyde returning punts for him. Mm-hmm. And he made that fantastic NFL punt returner fair catch. And he did once say, well, you know what? We're not returning punts anymore. So that's the kind of head you're working with there. Pretty stubborn fella. And, sometimes it comes out kind of boomerish. It just does.
Yeah, it was surreal, really. The whole Brian Ferentz experience at the end, wasn't it? It just...
You guys, I'm glad I didn't go through that, honestly. Because that's the coach's kid. And you guys, everybody has a relationship with Brian, some good, some bad, but Brian was really good at bullshitting with you, not deceiving you, but speaking with you. Mm-hmm. He knew what hurt. He knew the sores, and he was pretty forward with those. And that was great, except for the fixing part, so you didn't have to write about that part in the first place.
Yeah, it was
just be like, you get a little bit of a different perspective shooting photos on the field and listening to fans as you walk the sidelines, as that offense is 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. You see people wearing bags on their heads that say Brian, fire Brian. Student section loudly chanting fire Brian. I mean, it was really uncomfortable seeing Spencer Petras go through that what he went through in connection with that. And then, Beth and company making decision to let Brian go. And then Kirk's reaction to that is something is very rare around here, where he's taken off guard. He's so prepared and so regimented in what he does, and everything is controlled. That was interesting too. And it's just, we're almost like, okay, what the fuck is the final chapter here? We thought it might be Brian eventually succeeding him. That I think was the plan, whether Kirk ever admits it or not.
That was
and now where are we headed here? Is it Seth Wallace the next guy now? And that pisses LeVar Woods off. I mean, there's just a lot of extra shit going on in Iowa football.
It's going to be the end, really, it's going to be the end. And let's be honest, Kirk, what is he building at this point? And that's a fair question. He has a new offensive coordinator. He tried to Kaiser Sose the fan base into thinking offense wasn't a thing. And here it is. And he's got a new coordinator. What is he building in year 2020, 23 years, whatever, 24 years? And I don't mean that as a critical question. It's a reality. What are you building at this point? What are you building? You're redoing an offense that was a national joke. What are you building? So I really think the next chapter is stuck in everybody who observed Iowa football's throat. Who's next? And I really think that is kind of a sticking point. It's a stick in the spokes of the program right now. How much does it affect it? I don't know. But is it Seth Wallace? It was supposed to be Brian. I'm pretty sure Seth Wallace is going to be Brian's defensive coordinator, and Brian's gone. So maybe Seth Wallace is Kirk's pick to be successor. And if you look at the assistant head coach thing, Kirk wasn't handing out Bielema left because Kirk wouldn't let him be co-defensive coordinator. So he went to Kansas State to be co-defensive coordinator and became coach at Wisconsin. So Kirk he's not big with those titles. He really isn't. If you go back and you look at how many titles he's handed out, you're going to see a specific group of guys getting those titles and not LeVar Woods.
I think it's weird because my mind goes in different directions on this. I mean, program health is in a really good spot across the board. They have changed in 4 years, more so than I ever imagined they ever would. I mean, they have the lowest attrition. There are individual cases that I think are still an issue, but they're across the board. They're so much better, so much looser, so much, and I rode the same Uber with Kirk for an hour out in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago. And he's more relaxed now. I think since the Brian situation was taken care of, that it's allowed him to just kind of, he's worried about Brian being his son, but it's kind of like the, Hunter Biden type of thing.
Just think about how stressful that probably was at the Ferentz house with Mary and Kirk and Brian going through that shitstorm together, and the family. I mean, Brian's married, he's got kids,
right.
Tyler Barnes has kids, and they're all part of this community and they're living it.
Exactly. But then I guess Seth is very talented, will be a head coach.
I agree.
Will be whether it's at Iowa or somewhere else, it might be. I still think Kirk has a few more years left in him. And you look at defensively, they're as good or better than they've ever been. I mean, last year, to be number one in the country for the second straight year in yards per play allowed, and then have 200 more snaps than number two last year and still be able to do what they did was, Phil Parker, the defense itself, Seth Wallace, everybody did just such a remarkable job of being able to handle that and not lose the team and not have defensive players say, fuck you guys, I'm out of here, I'm hitting the portal. And to come back and to have each other's backs, it shows that there is a lot of character and development there. What does Kirk think for the future? The thing I do like is that he did this time versus Greg Davis, and certainly with Brian, is he just said, it's yours to Tim Lester. Now we'll see when it gets in the games.
For now.
But the verbiage is Tim Lester.
Overtime, Northwestern. Yeah. That'll be the score. 13-10 and over 3 overtimes. 13-10.
3 overtimes. I can't wait for that.
But the last lead I wrote was last lead I wrote was 13-10 Northwestern. It was the Noah Fant drop ball. And I think I wrote the offense was going backwards in a recliner. 13 to, I think it was overtime, and they scored basically both the teams scored 2 touchdowns. And that's another thing. Look at how the Big Ten landscape has changed. You know, a guy like Pat Fitzgerald has that happen to him, you know, and Kirk sees that. And so it changes you. It just, the landscape, you know, I change, you know, and I said on the podcast a million times, I'm afraid of saying something and being vaporized. When something like Pat Fitzgerald happens, I imagine there's a chilling effect within the coaching ranks. And if you look at Kirk, he's been, you know, coaching football now for 40 years or whatever. It changes your voice. And I think during the pandemic, a lot of us had our voices changed.
Kirk is, I think I've tried to, you know, I think it's natural in your mind to say, okay, this is a good cutoff point for Kirk. This is a good time for him to ride into the sunset. I just don't know what that looks like. And I was thinking, you know, maybe with the expanded Big Ten, you know, dude hates going west and playing night games. Well, their asses are out UCLA for an 8 o'clock Central Time, whatever it is. He's got to hate that. He's got to hate this travel. He's got to hate the expansion. He won't say that publicly because he wants to be part of the Big Ten company man stuff. But if he's willing to go through this expanded Big Ten and all this travel and all that, sorry, I'm lost. I don't know when the end is.
It's one game. Luckily for him, it's not like Arizona. Going to Arizona in September is miserable. I mean, it's 1,000 degrees and you're playing at 9:30. You know, at least in this case, they've trimmed it down. They're not Rutgers that get stuck with the 11 o'clock Eastern kickoff. You know, at USC. But you know, the thing that I think is the healthiest for Iowa itself is that the Beth Getz was the one that was in charge of all this. I mean, Gary gave him a free hand for so many years. I mean, you know, Doyle, which, you know, I have a story on Doyle, and they're going through our editing process. I talked to Doyle at length, and Rob and I will go into it.
That's super interesting because seriously, it's time to go back and talk to some people that happened, that were involved in that. It really is. That's great, Scott. Seriously, that's smart. I love that.
Yeah, he and I
wish your editors would freaking get fuck over it. I've been waiting for this story for 2 weeks, man. Scott's been teasing me with this thing for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Hey, that's how it goes on the podcast. When Scott has something good, it's teased. And when I had something good, whoop, there it is.
Yeah. I know. Well, I've been biting my tongue on that. I can't really, I'm not going to say anything.
I know. But you work for a little bit different company.
it kind of floated around. But anyway, with, you know, with Kirk, you know, I mean, you had the Rabdo situation, and then Kirk gives him assistant coach of the year, and it was basically free reign of kingdom, a fiefdom over here that ran itself. And, you know, whether it was, I mean, it was mainly Barbara Wilson who provided the gun and said, you know, I'm taking the cannolis, you fire the shot, you know, with Brian. But there's a different person in charge, and she is different. She's not going to let Kirk run the show. She was heavily involved in the offensive coordinator search. It wasn't just going to be, you know, she let him hire who he wanted, but she was involved in the interviews. She wanted to be involved in it, but she also wasn't micromanaging it. And she's the best voice Iowa's had in that position, you know, since probably Bob Bowlesby.
Well, unfortunately, that goes without saying. Iowa had a bumbling guy as an AD for a long, long time. I mean, let's face it.
And that's really what helped. I don't know if helped is, but allowed what happened in the football program to happen. You had no oversight. You had a guy over at Carver who was just like, yeah, do your thing. You know, we've got an internal study here showing racial bias, but Kirk, you take care of it. You know, I'm not going to get involved. And
one thing, talking through that, talking to a couple people who were at other athletic departments. The one thing that maybe it's a flaw, maybe it's a good thing, I don't know, but the football program is separate from the rest of the athletic department in Iowa physically. I mean, the building is over there. The AD's in Carver. So there's not a lot of hands-on. I'm sure there is now, but I really think there need to be administration in the football building, seeing what's happening.
Yeah, there needed to be
That's
more
all
oversight.
football. That's all football. That mean there's yelling, guys. There's yelling, cussing.
Oh yeah.
There's
Yeah.
guys getting weeded out. You
Mhm.
got to have a stomach for that, as a journalist or as a player. But there's weeding out. I mean, there is. How does it happen? How does it happen? Seeing how that few of those details came out during COVID and the Iowa racial situation, and seeing that really, I poo-pooed that during the podcast, and now seeing how that played out, or hearing how that played out, really, that's one of those painful holes in my journalist gut that, like, shit, could what was really happening there? Kids were getting weed out. How? And my stomach for that really went away.
Scott and I have talked about this too, Mark, and I know you remember this. I think it was 2015 or 16 when Chris Doyle. We had an interview with Chris Doyle in the main room there where Kirk does his weekly press conference. And I think it was me that asked this question just about, what changed from 2014 to 15. And Doyle said it comes down to what you tolerate or what, basically.
I remember that.
That seemed like, and you're thinking about that and you hear that as a journalist and you're like, all right, they're just a little more strict with things. They're not letting as much shit go. But there was more to it than that. It was much deeper than that. But how do you know that? But again, when I talked about the guilt I felt covering a team with this stuff going on behind the scenes, that's where it comes from, where maybe I should have dug a little deeper.
In talking to Doyle, I'm not going to reveal too much here on this. He does feel regret in a lot of areas. The turn was where they tightened things up that we saw was 2008-ish. Remember all the arrests, the felonies, the ghost room, the rape, all of that stuff that they decided we got to lock this up. But the problem is that they never adapted and changed, because then they had great kids after that and during that, but after that they didn't adapt. And so when it got closer and closer to the end, I mean, the one thing that stands out to me is 2017. I remember being on the field for senior day, and it was against Purdue. And you see Akram, and you see Miles Taylor, and you see James Butler, who was a graduate transfer. Those were the three black players who walked on senior day. And I remember distinctly going, man, this doesn't look good. And when you look at from the recruiting classes from 2012 to 2017, there were 56 players who left, which isn't a bad number. That's just a number, but 40 of them were black. And then you're like, okay, there is a problem here. And then and as you said, Rob, when James Daniels brings it up to Gary and they do an internal report and there's racial bias, and okay, now you can wear hoodies, and now I might play something besides country music in the weight room. And there wasn't enough. And, now other people, that I talked to, also said, and other black men who participated were emphatic that it wasn't just him, that it was also the environment in Iowa City being, there's not a black barber, there's not a black radio station, that the environment is difficult enough to adjust to. And then when you had that to go on top of it, that's what made it really untenable for most people. And then for us, thinking back to 2016, the comments that Doyle made 17 with that, none of us three could have come out with that story. We would have, nobody would have, only a few people at most, and they all would have been, nobody would have came out on the record to talk about that. Maybe one or two, but they would have been outcasts anyway. We would have been annihilated. The only way that all that could really come out is when it did. And otherwise, it would have been a piecemeal. Nothing would have changed. And who knows where the program would be today. It's a much healthier program, I think, now than it certainly was in 2020 when it comes to that stuff.
It took a trigger like James Daniels, somebody who a star player from a media center in Ohio who had a voice. And
incredibly intelligent guy too. Just super intelligent.
I think Scott really laid that out well. Part of it was he's from a black area in Ohio, and he's moving to a white area in Iowa. So there was, there's cultural differences, and I'm not sure James ever really truly embraced Iowa, but he's there, and the specific complaints that he had, the names that he named, that's really one. I wish he would talk about it again, because
I've tried, man.
there's some truth in
I
there
tried.
that I think people need to see. People need to hear. Will it be? I don't think it'll affect Kirk and reputationally, but it'd be nice to hear that specific complaint from a very. What I think I always enjoyed talking to James. Had a lot of depth to him. Really smart kid. It was for him to say that. That to me was maybe one of the biggest things in this whole story that I didn't really dwell on.
Yeah, no question. And it was powerful just for him to kind of start to open people's eyes, and then other respected African American players that came through here, like Mike Daniels and Jaleel Johnson and Amani Hooker and Marvin McNutt. You go down the list, and it wasn't just the disenfranchised or the guys that didn't do well here. It was guys that succeeded here and went to the NFL and saw a problem.
That's to me where you can kind of divide. Don't lump it all in together. Don't lump the lawsuit with the criticisms in 2020. The lawsuit, well paid out, and there were a lot of inconsistencies at best in those stories, and under deposition that they were refuted. But the criticisms by the people you just named, and plenty of others, Tavon Smith, Jordan Lomax, Jordan Cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, young men that you look at and you're very, they're respectful people. And most of their criticisms were not venting. They're not angry. They're truisms. They're exactly, this is what I believed and this is what I saw. And you have to respect that. And I think that those you take to heart. And I think Iowa did. I'll throw one nugget out there that Chris Doyle and Kirk Ferentz have not spoken since he left, and they never will. They were at the same table for Robert Gallery's College Football Hall of Fame induction, and they didn't speak.
That's interesting. Man, that's really interesting because, man, they were Pistons. I mean, I remember sitting in one-on-one with Kirk, asking him who is your person you bounce ideas off of? Who is the person that reels you in or shows you the space that you need to? And he's very quickly said Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
I think the saddest part of this, guys, is they were a really good football duo.
Yes.
Doyle and Ferentz, and knew how to win here, what it took to win at Iowa. The thing is that element, we hope, has been removed from the program, and Iowa is still succeeding without the bullshit, without the stuff that didn't need to happen, without the bias. Right. That makes it even that much more disheartening that student athletes went through that when they didn't need to win. You can win without being like that.
Yeah. There's a specter of Joe Moore, and obviously Kirk's mentor, and I think Chris Doyle's mentor. Still, he was a tough football coach. I mean, he got fired at Notre Dame for a closed fist punch to a player. I mean, that's hard. I mean, that's you can't do that. You just can't do that. That kind of erases a lot of the good things. So, there's that toughness test that football is always, anytime you have a sport that's physical, where you got to weed people out to get to the best.
And there's a protection element too, right, Mark?
Conflict. There's just going to be conflict, and there's going to be, what did I do? Well, there are some, parameters. There are some parameters in football. Hey, you flunked Spanish, you didn't make weight. We got to get rid of you. That's what it is. And to me, one thing that really struck me during all that was it's social. College football for a kid is a socioeconomic engine. It's a chance for you to either be an NFL professional football player or get your degree and start a life. So there's a socioeconomic imperative for these kids that can get taken away in a flash. And that's just an uneven relationship that just harder and harder to stomach these days. So, but hey, when you're a kid and you sign up for that, you got to follow the rules.
And now that dynamic is flipped considerably. with the transfer portal, the ability for people not to put their thumb on you and say, we're not going to let you go. Hey, it was between you, Iowa and Illinois for you. We're not going to let you go anywhere. They can't do that. And you have immediate eligibility. And with NIL, it is effectively like, hey, they're not treating me well here. I can go somewhere else and I can make money doing it. I think that element is forced programs to care more about their players as players and as people, that rather than just, hey, we've got them under our watch here for 5 years. And if they want to go somewhere, then, go ahead and go, but tough shit,
And there was one element of the internal study on that found racial bias, where some of the student athletes interviewed talked about being sold something in recruiting that was different when they got here. And that is like, if you're looking to blow shit up, that's what you do, is tell kids they're going to have something or get something or be in a position when they get somewhere, and it's not the case. And I think that may be the biggest change what's happened in the last 4 years is the honesty up front. And like Mark said, if you tell a kid, listen, man, you got to make weight for yourself, man. It's to protect you. These are, you have to be, we want to know that if we put your ass out on the field in front of 70,000, that you can handle yourself, that you can take care of yourself. And that's important no matter what color you are. So as long as that's the approach, fine. But basing it on skin color or background or things that you're telling guys to get them here and not delivering that, and I think when there was a lot of the attrition guys back in the late part of last decade, it had to do with that. It had to do with guys showing up here and not seeing what they were told or sold during the recruiting process.
And the other part of that is that there was, once they handed them off, once the assistants recruited them, brought them here, then they went to the weight room. Then it was, they couldn't have any contact with them. And then they saw the weight room staff, Doyle, whatever, for so long. And he had such a powerful impact in shaping the narrative about them that they couldn't get them back. Now they all work together a lot more. And that's Ray Braithwaite. That's the assistants having more of a voice. That's the black assistants having a much stronger voice than they did 5 years ago. And that's probably been a much better, and the reason why, again, in the portal, nobody's lost fewer players than Iowa in the Big Ten.
One thing I think Kirk said during all this was he had Doyle on the watch too long. And it's true. I mean, you're a cop at a football for a football team you're telling them when to sleep, you're telling them when to eat, what to eat, how to work out, all this stuff. So you're the boss. And so Kirk admitted, hey, I left that. I had him be the authoritative voice way too long. And if you think about it, I forgot what I was going to say, but that really affected things. And for me, with Doyle, it just kind of put him in an impossible situation. He didn't handle it very well. And in year 20, he's the guy who comes up with the themes, the Into the Black, all those themes for the seasons and all that stuff. That was him. So in year 20, what are you grabbing for? You fall back on the things that you've worked. And, then you find out that, hey, Jane, that you're scarring people. And that's really hard. I mean, it's a fascinating dynamic, the whole thing. I'm sure people are waiting for us to talk about the Hawkeyes in 2024.
Like I said before, Mark, we do whatever the hell we want to, and the conversation just goes where it goes.
There you go. The ball goes where I did ask. That was my question. I asked him, I remember asking Kirk, why can't you guys target a wide receiver and throw him the ball 14 times a game? The ball goes where the ball goes. Okay, all right, Hal. Good luck with that. Out of space.
Yeah, so the ball goes where it goes. That's
it's usually hitting the freaking rubber filament, last couple of years.
Sideways.
No
offense.
Hey,
Kirk also, I think during that transition from offensive coordinator, Greg Davis, hired a few guys, that running backs coach, Chris, I can't remember his name.
White.
All of his recruits were basically shot out of a cannon. So he was out in New Jersey. And if you look at all those recruits that he brought in from New Jersey, they were great at the time. And but then they got in here and you really are 5'10" and 240 pounds. What the hell are we going to do with you? And they found out pretty quickly that those guys didn't fit.
Yeah,
And
that
then-
was the whole Eno thing
Mhm.
with Bobby Kennedy and Chris White. They were part of the Eno.
The Texodus.
Don't tell Kirk you're taking a visit to Missouri.
He lost some traction there with those coaches, and they were apparently not on the same page. But that caused a lot of headache.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right, man. We've been going 45 minutes here. I should probably pay some bills and let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Hear from a few more of our sponsors right now, and we'll be back on the other side. And we may talk about current Hawkeye stuff. We may not. Stay tuned. And we're back here on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast at a little after 10 a.m. Central Time on June the 13th. It's a good time to let you guys know that switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa City can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and we will continue on here and maybe talk a little bit of Iowa football related news in that we have a replacement. If you can replace Ed Podolak, that's tough to do. He's taking over. We don't know if he'll replace, but some interesting things here, guys, that I want to get out here before I grab your opinion on this hire. Ed Podolak was a color commentator for 1 year in 1978 for the NFL on NBC. So that was his prior experience to joining Jim Zabel on WHO in 1982. Zabel retired after 96. Dolph then joined Ed in 97. And then in terms of Pat Anger's hire, when Ed took over the job, he was 35. Pat is 37. So kind of some commonalities there. And because Ed was born in 1957. Pat Anger was born in 1987. So 30-year difference there. So more symbiotic. And interestingly,
I'm 20 years older than Pat. That hurts. We have the same hair. We have the same hair.
You're in better shape than Pat, though, I think.
I'm just I'm an old thin man at this point.
But this is, I don't know if it's an olive branch, but we know Pat, how close Pat is with Chris Doyle.
Yes.
And their connection with Brett Greenwood and that. And so there is some connection here. Pat is somebody who's well-liked throughout the program, from Chris Doyle, Kirk Ferentz, and down the line. And I could tell from the reaction, social media-wise, from the fans, that this is an exciting hire, and that's what you want to do. You want to get some. Now he's got to do the job, but those of us, we've all been around Pat, and he's never really at a loss for words, so he should be good at this.
I called him Iowa's everyman because he's the guy that can fit in any place you want. He's so self-deprecating. He'll get up in a country club and he'll act nervous and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm full of shit. I'm talking about, remember the interviews with him talking about his dog and doesn't have thumbs and things like that. He's just a hilarious guy. But I tell you what, when you listen to him, it's like, wow, this guy knows his shit. He knows it really well and he can convey it. The only fear I've had about this the whole time is don't say what I just said, shit, on the radio.
You know what? That's easier than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Not say shit. It's easier than you think. But for Pat, for a player, yeah, there'll probably be some sweaty moments for old Beth Getz.
Hopefully he gets the Bud and Mary sponsorship from Pody.
Yeah.
You know what, Pat? Pody's kind of further down the road, so as a guy who, didn't really talk about weed, but hey, I do now. You get farther down the road, you can let the world know that, Pat, maybe wait. I really think they should have a podcast with him every week, just have Pat's Minute, where he goes and talks to a player, and because Pat knows players, and he'll be able to relate to them in a real Iowa way. Pat, he was one of those players I actually got to go and do a home visit with. I met him and his mom and his dad, and we had a great time. It was with the three of his friends. One was an Army vet, another guy just sweated in weird places, and then the other I don't really remember very well. But we went to a bowling alley. I can't remember the name of it. I wish I could. And they did some tequila shots. It was guys being fun with guys and old friends and tight. And one of them was a linebacker from South Dakota. Anyway, they threw the ball as hard as they could at the pins. I don't know if they ever knew what bowling was. But at the end of our conversation at Pass, he said, "Let's go bowling, fuckers," and we all went bowling. So he knows how to tell stories. He'll be able to pick the right stories. He'll be able to relate in that way. I think it'll be different from Ed in that Ed's a little further down the road, but Ed also saw the game on a wizard level. I mean, he would know. He would see a play. He would know where the linebacker was in the defense if it was Iowa trying to run the ball. Ed was tremendous at that. I think Pat will be tremendous at that. And you know what, you guys, a little bit of that goes a long way. Not every people, I think, want to be more entertained than they do want to know where the backside pressure was, that kind of thing. And I think Pat will be able to do that.
Yeah, it's that marriage of being able to impart knowledge, teach the game to the listener. But like Mark said, also do that in an entertaining way. Don't just get like hardcore X and O. You got to be able to have some personality. And I say this because I love Dolph. He's lost a little bit off his fastball through the years. I mean, it happens to all of us. It's happened to me. Certainly it's happened to me. So you're breathing in some new life into this. I think it'll help Dolph too.
Yeah, I agree. That's smart. I agree 100%.
Yeah, it's going to bring in different energy. I mean, Pat's the kind of guy, whether it's before the 2015 Big Ten championship game, hey, let's go out and drink, these bars out of beer in downtown Indianapolis. He can fit in anywhere, and he sees the game well, and he also relates well to the players. So he's going to be able to get more out of them than even we do, even on the side, because he had a very successful career at Iowa, but it almost ended before he got a chance to, because he had injuries, he had problems with, getting drunk and let's go fight everybody downtown, and really came from a tough, dark place. And then, turned his career around, got his head right. He's given people great advice. George Kittle told me that Pat was the one that really kind of convinced him to, quit going downtown and getting drunk every night, do things the right way. But then again, he still likes to have a good time. And I was texting with him yesterday and I said, hey man, I just want to see you and AJ Eads now in Indianapolis together at Big Ten Media Days, because AJ is going to be the commissioner of a conference here in the next 10 years. I mean, he's brilliant. And
he's got his shit together, man.
Yeah. He knows his shit, and he has the respect of all the football coaches in the Big Ten. He can handle the room. And, him and Kerry Kenny, I mean, both of those two at the Big Ten are outstanding. But anyway, I really like what Pat brings. And I think you see the way the fan base reacts almost in every single situation like this. People go, oh, him. Nothing like that with Pat. And I think that tells you a lot about him.
I'm glad you brought that up, the adversity that Pat went through at Iowa. downtown can be adversity if you let it be. And he saw that and he sensed that and he was able to pull himself back from that, which I think is fucking huge, to be honest, because I didn't go to Iowa because I knew I wouldn't be able to do that. So I went to boring ass Northern Iowa and hey, I made it through. But to me, that's I don't want to say dark side, but that was a conflict in his story that he can tell players. And, obviously that resonates because he has the stripes. The other part of Pat I would love to sit down and talk to him was being the shrapnel that the Colts took for suck for luck. Pat could have been in the NFL for 4 more years, I think, at least. But no, he played every down, every special teams down. The Colts ruined him. I would love to talk to him about that because I think he would have got a second contract. He was that kind of player.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he would tell you that Norm saved him. I remember that conversation. Yeah. He's like, I was lost. I just kind of lost ship at sea. And he sat down in Norm's office and Norm said, hey man, you either get your shit together or it's not going to happen for you here. And you're going to waste a bunch of talent. And luckily he got through to Pat and changed the course of his life. And my guess is Norm did that with a lot of people.
So if you remember Norm though, I mean, giant-headed older man with that haircut.
Fred Flintstone.
When a football coach with that giant of a head and that kind of magnetic personality tells you to get your shit together, and he probably says it in an interesting, funny way that gets your attention, like, hey, we're not fucking around here. What an effective coach. I mean, you could probably have a ton of players. And back to AJ Eads, I remember the first time I heard about Pat's, downtown shit was AJ at the Big Ten Media Day. He was talking about Pat. So it's the truisms come out. And I think that I think Hawkeye fans are going to have a fucking great time with Pat in the radio booth, honestly. I'm surprised this happened because it was so obvious and smart that there's no way in hell this could happen, right?
I really thought it was going to be Nate, and I love Nate too. He's great, but he's more polished, and he's the safer pick in some
businessman too.
Yeah, exactly. So he would know, he knows all the ins and outs. He would have done a great job too. But Pat, again, is the person that I want to hear what he has to say. And back in the old days when games, in the 90s and 80s, when games were on infrequently, or then now there's no need to listen to radio. You've got commentators, you've got TV, but people are going to tune in to listen to him. And they did with Ed and Dolph, but now it's like, I really got to listen to what he has to say.
I remember doing the AJ Eads. I can picture myself in the basement of my old house interviewing AJ Eads for his recruiting story. And I got off the phone. I'm like, holy shit, is that kid smart? He was talking to me about freaking history books and like literature that he reads. And I'm like, man, I feel like I'm a piece of shit here. But it just continued on when he got here. We all know AJ and have gotten to know him through the years, and just not surprising at all that he's having a successful post-football life.
Yeah, he's assistant commissioner of football administration now at the Big Ten. He's the one that's in charge of, give you an example. When I was out at Big Ten meetings in LA, which sucks in its own right that they're out in LA. But, even Kirk was like, hey, can I skip these to AJ? And he's like, no, you got to go. You have to be there. And so he made him go, and they made him all be in there. And he handles the room so well. Tony Petitti does too, the new commissioner, and Kerry Kenny's been fantastic. I mean, any of those three are great, but AJ in 10, 12 years, he could be leading the Big Ten. No question in my mind.
This would not be a Hawkeye podcast without some conversation about Caitlyn Clark. Thankfully, we don't have a ton of time left in the podcast to pour over this, centimeter by centimeter. But since Scott and I last recorded last Thursday, the newest controversy drama surrounding Iowa's favorite daughter is not making the Olympic team. And it wasn't just not making the Olympic team. It was the reasoning why she didn't make the Olympic team. Because we can sit here, guys, and say, from a merit standpoint, this is me personally. I'm not speaking for Scott and Mark, but there are so many good players out there that got left off. The Dallas guard. I can't think of
Agumbawale.
Agubawale. I mean, she's better than Caitlyn right now. She just is as a basketball player. She's not on the Olympic team. So merit-wise, I get it. It's just the other stuff. It's, the coach who's the coach, Cheryl Reeves, who's the coach of the Minnesota team, saying, throwing out somewhat cryptic tweets, basically saying, disparaging Caitlyn Clark, the attention she's getting in the WNBA. And the players, Christine Brennan, who broke the story, talked about her sources saying that one of the reasons Caitlyn didn't make it is because they didn't want her to be a distraction from her popularity. So I think there's two conversations here. Merit standpoint, I get it. But if you're trying to grow the game, it just seems like the pushback we've seen in the last several months against Caitlyn Clark, who is the golden goose that can help you grow a game that you've been trying to grow since the league started in 1997, I don't understand it. And we sit here every week and say, eventually it's going to stop, right? And it just keeps going.
This is the scenario that a lot of people at Iowa thought might happen. And we started to see it. We talked about with Cheryl Swopes, 4 months ago or whatever, when she started complaining that, there should be an asterisk by her record because she's 25 and she's played her COVID year. And of course, none of it was true. And none of it was, hey, my bad, I'm sorry, I didn't know this. Nothing like that. But the narrative got out there. And then there was constant goalpost moving. She breaks Kelsey Plum's record. Well, yeah, but Lynette Woodard really had the record from back then. So then she breaks Lynette Woodard's record. Yeah, but then there's this one woman named Pearl Moore or whatever who did it. She's not going to get to that. And then Pistol Pete Maravich. Well, he only played 3 years, but of course he took twice as many shots and he played in a segregated conference. But there wasn't a 3-point shot. Just constant. Anything she does well, people have to move the goalposts on, and it's been even worse. I mean, since the Final Four game when ESPN had that UConn broadcast, and all the former UConn players were, especially Diana Taurasi, were really coming after her, and then everybody hates the Iowa fans. It's like, this is what you want. This is what you fucking asked for, is grow the game, bring all these fans in. How many people around here have the WNBA app and have it on their TV now because of Caitlyn Clark? And you've got all this attention. All these people are watching it. All these people are going. And instead, she's not good enough. And here's why. And then it's, as we know, Rob and Mark, now it's just completely politicized, which means that, you've got the House Judiciary Committee for the Republicans saying there's no reason she shouldn't be on there. And then you have, people on the other sides, just taking anything out of context to make her look bad. And it's just, guys, if it doesn't happen by the 4th of July, in my eyes, people are going to start to move on, then the Olympics, then football season. And then people here will say, you know what, I'm not getting the fucking WNBA app next year. I'm not going to watch anymore.
Yeah. This is going to become a way to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
We see it as, hey, there's a comet going into the sky right now. Why don't you all follow that? But you know what? You say that in sports, and sports is going to be like, fuck you. I did this first. I'm doing this. This is me. So there's a big me thing going on. And then somebody comes in and changes the parameters of popularity. Holy shit, they're going to react to that. It's jealousy, I think. And that's sports. That's sports. And right now what Caitlyn Clark is going through is sports. It's like almost a hazing in my mind. It's like, oh my God, well, this player can't be this good. I'm going to do this to her. And I'm going to body her. That's a great equalizer in basketball, right? Bodying the living shit out of somebody. So she's going to get all that. That's sports. That's hazing. The opinion factory that comes out of that, that's where people can get vaporized. I think, like a Christine Brennan or anybody like that. Just, you got to be careful. You just got to be careful. You got to measure things out. And Rob broke it down perfectly. Probably not good enough for the Olympics. There would have been some buzz for that, though. So when it comes down to that, I'm glad that sports will make the decision. But yeah, WNBA, if you want to be irrelevant, keep doing this.
This was from Christine Brennan's column when she broke that she was not on the Olympic team. She talked to, and for those that are listening that don't know, Christine Brennan is pretty connected when it comes to things like this, especially Olympics.
Yes.
Two other sources, both longtime USA basketball veterans with decades of experience in the women's game, told USA Today Sports Friday that concern over how Clark's millions of fans would react to what would likely be limited playing time on a stacked roster was a factor in the decision-making. So you're going to deny somebody because they're going to bring too much attention to your sport. Think about the fucking logic there.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine Iowa Wrestling holding back, name the wrestler.
Spencer Lee.
Spencer Lee. Ben Keeter. We'll get up to that. Ben Keeter.
Holding back because they don't want the sport to be too dramatic. Okay, sure. It's wrestling. Don't do that. Don't be drunk. Don't build a narrative because that doesn't work with wrestling. Oh, wait, it does with professional wrestling. So, hey, why not be that? I don't know. Yeah. It's a time where you got to be creative with what you have. And WNBA, come on, look at this. I mean, don't call games differently. My God, don't do that. But be fair.
Mm-hmm. Be fair. I look at this like, when you get high school coaches are this way, unfortunately, when you're talking about all-state voting. And they go in there, they want their seniors to get the all-state recognition. They got a sophomore who's the best player in their area, on their team, in their league. Yeah, but this guy's really worked hard. This guy really deserves it. And so lo and behold, you get that senior 6'1", 250 offensive lineman who might be going D3. But hell, it worked. You talk about it with Iowa with AJ Epenesa not getting on the field. Those things happen almost all the time in sports. Caitlyn Clark on merit, there is certainly a disagreement and on an argument one way or the other. Is she could be player 10 or she could be player 14. I don't care.
It should be mentioned, Scott, that I believe the U.S. Women's Olympic team is won 7 gold medals in a row. Right. So this isn't a competitive thing. They're going to win. They're going to win. They could have put one of our fat asses on there and be fine. I'd go in there as
long as we didn't play. Yeah, sure. I mean,
but my millions of fans would be in uproar.
Yeah,
not getting
but when you look at things like whether they worry that she doesn't going to play enough for the fans, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of at all.
Paris would be going crazy for her. The autographs, the attention to your sport. How much that would give you? Whatever. Go ahead.
The other sports that America's there, the men's basketball team and everything, they're fans too. They saw her play at Iowa and all that stuff. And yet, no, let's ignore the most popular discussion person there is. And then let's have Diana Taurasi at age 42 go out there. And she's been the biggest critic of all of Caitlyn Clark because this comes back to, women supporting women. There has been zero part of that. There's hazing. The hazing that's been great is Kate Martin's hazing. Go wear a Hello Kitty backpack, make her wear a South Carolina sweatshirt in front of Asia Wilson at the University of South Carolina. That's perfect hazing. They love her. That's been the funnest thing to watch. The other part is, Kennedy Carter coming from behind and shoving Caitlyn Clark and saying, yo, bitch, and shoving her down. And then they don't even review it to see if that's a flagrant foul. It's like, what are you doing here? And where's the goddamn commissioner? Say something. Yeah. Come out. This is the person that's got us charter flights. This is the person that's going to raise all of your salaries. We're expanding now because all these people are watching because of her. You want to just put her out there to the point where I don't even care. I can't wait for the season to get over with. That's where they're at right now.
Right.
It's this concept of trying to quantify her value. It seems like the current players or ex-players that kind of pave the way are like, she has to pay her dues. That's fine. She has to pay her dues. And no, she's not the only one that people are coming to see. She's the main one they're coming to see, though. So two things can be true at the same time. There are a lot of really good, great women's players. You mentioned Aja Wilson, Gumbawale. There are great players in the WNBA that are really worth watching, but people want to watch Caitlyn Clark. That's who they want to watch. We've said it. The rising tide lifts all boats. Just get on the fucking boat. Would you people get on the boat and let it happen? It just seems like they're fighting against progress.
We have the WNBA app because my wife wants to watch every Aces game and Fever game.
Good to see you at Archfest last weekend.
Yeah, it was great to see you too. You and Kathy and everything. And I think
we actually do see each other off the podcast. We saw each other at Archfest last week. We did our hippie Iowa City thing downtown, hung out with our wives and looked at like sculptures and shit. It was really it's liberating to do.
Yeah, exactly. But when I watch like the Aces, I've mentioned this before, I've been thoroughly impressed. Kelsey Plum's like one of my favorite players now. Everybody that watches them goes, wow, she's awesome. She's so cool. I really didn't know much about her at all, other than hearing, the Caitlyn Clark's chasing her record.
Yeah.
Aja Wilson, okay, I got it. She's great. I wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for Caitlyn Clark. And that's what this was supposed to be about.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's now, and if I was straight up Iowa fan, I'd be like, fuck you guys. I'm not watching this shit. And I don't care. You guys treated her poorly. You're making fun of us like we're a bunch of hayseeds. Like, I really wish every goddamn telecast that they quit telling us that this is the best league in the world and it's the most physical league. No shit. Like, we don't know that from every league in the country. The NFL. Well, none of us think that Cooper DeJean is going to go and become the best player in the NFL in year one. We know how physical it is. It's just, very condescending. And
he's going to be really good, though.
He was going to be really good.
He's going to be fun in the NFL.
Yes, absolutely.
Hey, what do you guys think about Lisa Bluder retiring? It was weird, Rob, seeing that because we were there in the beginning, and so I thought it was great. I thought it was the right time. One thing that freaked me out, going back and looking at some of her record, she was at Drake for 10 years.
Yeah,
she came to Iowa in her mid-30s, man, and boy, that
she started coaching at San Ambrose when she was like what, 22, 23? She was young.
Yep.
Not a silver spooner. Not a silver spooner. She earned every goddamn stripe. Huge respect to her. And what a clean transition. Football will not have that. I mean, football is going to go through some bullshit. Jan Jensen was right there. They swung right to that vine. Everyone's happy. Perfect. I hope it works out. Jan, I didn't have a lot of interaction with her, but she was always gracious. And for me, that always like, what, when they sucked, and that first year they didn't have really any players that Bluder recruited. They had some players of heart that really fought, and I think they actually improved quite a bit that first year. But just finding that voice, finding that person, and then having that baton pass so nicely. You wish it would be that way for football, but we know it's not going to be.
Lisa inherited the baby-faced assassin from Solon, Lindsay Meter, who's going into the Iowa Hall of Fame this year. She's one of the inductees. So you guys remember her, man. She could shoot.
Yes. Kara Consuegra, Randy Peterson.
Yep.
Randy Peterson was inside. I think she ended up coaching at Co. I think she might still be a coach.
She is still
St. Louis, yeah. St. Louis, right?
Kara Consuegra is the new coach at Marquette.
Oh, wow. So,
head coach there.
I remember talking to Kara Consuegra about how much we could bench. Now I think she'd kick my ass.
She was a tough point guard, man. She was really good.
She was like the first Sam Logic, man.
Yeah. When I was kind of surprised because I didn't see Lisa retiring now, but when she said that one of the main reasons was so she and David could travel, her husband, I'm like, you're good. Go enjoy it. You've built this program into something I don't think people saw coming. I mean, this, Mark. You've been around here like Scott and I. 2 straight national championships games. Come on, man. That's incredible.
To me, that's bigger than Gable almost. Gable
Yeah.
winning 10 straight national. There's a little more competition for the Iowa for women's basketball title. There's a lot more bodies in that. There's more attention. Sorry, but wrestling, there's more attention on that. And for Iowa to be able to be in that arena 2 straight motherfucking years, there's no coach with those stripes. Sorry, Kirk. There's no coach with those stripes. Lisa is the statue coach. The one stat people want to put Kirk in a statue. No. Hayden's a statue coach. Put him without Hayden, there's no Kirk. Sorry. And as far as I'm concerned, Kirk kept the standard. Hayden raised the standard. Lisa Bluder raised the standard. Put her on a statue.
And she raised it from Vivian Stringer.
Yeah.
So we got to remember Vivian Stringer had a Final Four team and some great goddamn players,
incredible players.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that too. Those eras, and but I think Bluder, the sustained success over years. Plus, she's from Marion. She's an area person.
Yep.
Do the right thing, Iowa. It's a no-brainer.
Oh, I can only imagine that that's going to happen. I mean, where they moved the Gable statue over to the new wrestling facility, that there's an open hole there. Be perfect for Lisa. But there's nobody that's more beloved now than Lisa Bluder in Iowa. I mean, she is. Jan always told me, and it's the perfect description. Lisa is the person that everybody feels like they can have a cup of coffee with, and she just has that every person vibe that you feel good talking to her most of the time, and it makes you feel good inside. But then also really a great coach, and the turnover. I think the most fascinating part of this, and if they succeed, this is going to be one of the big blocks in this mosaic of Iowa women's basketball, is that when she came to that decision and she told Beth Getz, it was during a dead period. So they couldn't even contact the recruits or anybody to say, hey, by the way, I'm retiring. And rather than let it get out, they decided to wait on the announcement until it wasn't a dead period. And then Beth had to figure out right away, because Iowa sold out every gate. She's got to decide if Jan is the right person for that.
Right.
You got Jenny Baranchik, who's at Oklahoma now, and probably if you call her, she's probably coming home. You got to decide that. And there are all but probably 10 other coaches in the country would have said, I'm coming to Iowa. Sure, I'm coming there. But she's got to decide, is Jan the right person? Well, she made that call. They waited. They postponed that announcement. Then they staggered it, 3 o'clock to 3:30. 3 o'clock, Lisa Bluder. 3:30, Jan Jensen. Both of them went round the clock calling every player, every recruit, every signee. This is what's going to happen. And they were completely successful. I mean, I think outside of one person who was going to visit in the transfer portal, they went, 100% on every single player. And Jan is, she's perfect for the program. Everybody respects her. So I think it was a fantastic handoff. They're not going to be as successful this year as they were last year, but I don't think that should be the standard anyway. I mean, last year and the year before was the exception. The standard is get to the NCAA tournament and then see what happens, at least for this year, is my opinion.
All right, Scott.
Beth Getz is too good to be true, isn't she? Mm-hmm. Seriously, she's done every issue or thing that she's had to face. She's done so well. So gives you a lot of hope for the future of the program.
Scott, we don't have to worry about the moratorium on the next for football, so we can just do that for 5 minutes. Next for football, I'm a million miles away. I live in the woods. Basically, I step out my door, I live in the woods. I'm still at Mark Stoops.
Today, I would say Mark Stoops. I think him or Chris Kleiman would be the choices in the next.
Mark Stoops would move the needle, and I think that's kind of what Iowa football needs right now.
But if
with the next guy
in 3 years, I might be more at Seth Wallace.
Maybe if Kirk can make it, when Kirk makes it 3 more years, fortitude is his thing. It's his goddamn thing. Maybe, you know what? And Seth Wallace, I think could be a really good football coach. I love everything about him. I worry about him chewing You need to chew less. He had an earring in college, so he was kind of a punk rock kid. Played wide receiver.
I know.
Oh, which you look at him now, and you're like, I don't know, but maybe. But I'm still Mark Stoops, man. I think every week I'm gonna be a Hayden fucking fest, man. And you know what? This program, there's just a huge chunk of people who want to celebrate that free spirit, that independent attitude, what Hayden was. And that's a lot. To me, that's an ingrained, and if Iowa football can just kind of engender that, or just pull that in somehow, pull in the Hayden vibe.
Mm-hmm.
I think Stoops does that every damn weekend. And I think thematically it would be a great thing. Can he coach football? Can he recruit at Iowa? Oh yeah, there's those things too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think he'd be fine, but.
And I think there is a little bit, I don't know, say tension, maybe a disconnect a little bit between Hayden guys and Kirk guys. I think there isn't as good of a bond, or I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for. I sense there is some disconnect.
I think anytime any regime gets replaced, there's going to be like, we did this better. Yeah. We did things you didn't do. There's just going to be that attitude. It's America. It's people. I think John Steppe stinks. I think he's horrible. No, I'm kidding. He took over for me at the Gazette, by the way, people. He's fine.
As a matter of fact, we have John on the podcast now. John Steppe, ladies and gentlemen. No,
he's terrific. He's terrific.
We love you, John.
You know what? When you do something, you're proud of it, and you always think, nobody can do this better than me. And so there's a little bit of that vibe.
But it has been now 20 or going on to year 26.
Yeah.
So
it's the unusual thing, right?
Yeah. Voices are quieter now. They're a little bit grayer bearded.
Yeah.
To have a coach that lasts that long is just unusual.
Me, I think there's a certain energy. There's a vibe that comes with Hayden that set Iowa football apart. In the 80s when it needed it. If Hayden flops, this program is in the hellhole shit there. And I think he's the statue. I just do. I'll never get. That'll be an argument that you'll never be able to get me off of, because I saw Iowa football before Hayden, and after it was a very different thing.
I always said that I thought Hayden Fry was the most important coach in Iowa history, and Dan Gable was the best coach in Iowa history, and I think you can differentiate the two. But I think part of the problem was the latter part of the 90s wasn't a golden era for Iowa football. It really trended. And when you look at, Mark, both of you remember when it was like in 98, 99, when Kirk took over, and then to go from 0-8 to 8-0 in a 4-year period, and to have the rock stars that they had, the Dallas Clark, the Robert Gallery, the energy, the 3-year period, 2 Big Ten titles, it's easy just to leave the rest in the dust and think of that as like BCAD type of movement forward. Right. But there are a few players that I think have been collateral damage. I think Cedric Shaw is one, Tavian Banks, Jared DeVries, fantastic players that need a little bit more. DeVries has gotten a little bit more attention, but I think Cedric Shaw absolutely needs to be in the Hall of Fame. I think that's one that is a complete overload.
2 carries against a good Michigan State defense. I'll never forget that game. I did actually watch that game, and I agree with you, Scott. Those names they really ring out still. And there's always. I think next is going to be fun, and I don't know when that story starts for you guys. I'm glad I don't do it.
Let me hit these headlines that I was going to get to just for housekeeping purposes for folks that listen to the podcast and are Iowa fans that may have not heard about these things. Molly Davis, Iowa guard, was announced yesterday that she will be a grad assistant at Evansville. Congratulations to Molly. Phil Steele is piecing out his preseason content and named Jay Higgins, Iowa linebacker, the National Defensive Player of the Year preseason. Jax DeJean, who we've talked about on the podcast before, younger brother of Cooper DeJean, who we've talked about on this podcast, picked up an Iowa offer at camp last week. Think different than Cooper. He's 6'4", 200, but very athletic, really good basketball player, good in track. Chances are very good that he will be a Hawkeye. I'll go out on a limb there. Ava Jones, just completed her freshman year at Iowa. We know the tragic story of her and her family in a motor vehicle accident. I believe it was in Louisville. Took a medical red shirt. She just couldn't get herself back into Division I basketball shape. It's we all know it's a very high level. And the last one, and I'll get your guys' opinion on this one. And this is shout out to Pat Hardy, who owns the rights to this podcast. I think he may or may not. But he's another old dude. He let me know this morning that he had spoken to Brad Heinrich, CEO of the Iowa Swarm NIL Collective. And Brad says there has been no significant change in Swarm membership count over the last 6 weeks since he revealed there were 2,900 members total in Swarm membership. I don't know, guys, this NIL thing, it's going to go where it's going to go. You can do what you can. You got to get creative. Competition is tough. But I'll go back to what I've been saying all along. How much do you want from the fans, man? They're paying more for season tickets. They're paying more for licensing. They're paying more for merchandise, all this shit. And now you want them to pay your student athletes too? Again, we talked about it before. Hopefully this comes under the umbrella of the university where fans get taken out of this equation. But right now, if I'm a fan, I'm like, what more do you want me to give?
That's the problem right now. Once this became legalized, and SMU could bring out the golden Camaro or Trans Am or whatever from the Eric Dickerson era, and I love that tweet. I think that was like their first tweet. It was like, all right, like you're back. Is when you look at this era right now, how much more can you expect? I mean, you're a fan, you're given, and now you want me to give more, and whether it's Fran saying that it's $500,000 for a player when it's really only $2, and or whatever, you're feeling like, how much more? Now that's why it's good that the House settlement will allow a lot of this to go in-house, and they can all pay for it. And that means athletics departments are going to have to make some decisions. And it's probably going to be some cuts, and there's going to have to be, but they also have the power to raise money that the collectives don't, at least out of the general public, which is they can have iClub meetings. They can figure out how to marry the Tiger Hawk with this. And then once they get the money, then they can figure out how to disperse the money. That's going to be helpful. And as long as they figure out a way to do that kind of soothes the football into things, this will go well. But there's still going to have to be a need for outside revenue generation because everybody's going to want a quarterback. Everybody's going to want that pass rusher, and you're going to have to go to that car lot, or you're going to have to go to somebody and get that Trans Am to make sure that they'll play for you.
And I think I think just to just throw it to you, Mark, I think what's left a bad taste in the Iowa fans' mouths with this as well is the Caden Proctor situation with the NIL raising a shitload of money just to get the kid here, and then he leaves. And then if you're a fan, you're like, what the hell are we doing here?
This is going to be insanely simple-minded, and I apologize. So as a bud tender, I ask people every day, hey, would you mind rounding up for, I think now it's a organization trying to get marijuana laws affected on the national level. So, hey, round up for this. If I'm Iowa or if I'm the collective, I get with a corporation, say, Hy-Vee. And I say, hey, here's what's happening. We need your help. Can we round up for the Hawkeyes? And I do that. And just maybe it's a trickle. Maybe people go, screw you. I think people would round up for the Hawkeyes unless you're, wearing a Cyclones jersey, which, then you'll politely decline, hopefully politely.
You can have a choice. You could go round up for Cyclones, round up for Hawkeyes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right up comes up on you.
Do that NIL. Get the corporation, a giant corporation with a lot of people going in. Maybe even a dispensary. I don't know. Maybe it would work. I don't know. But round up, that's a trickle. there's that. Do that, and then you got to get with corporations, especially in Iowa. So take that off the fans. Get with corporation. Corporation, put them. They're Iowans too. They see what the state is, and you guys. I don't think we're kidding each other anymore. Iowa's #1 entertainment export is college football and Caitlyn Clark. So get behind that corporation and support it. And you can see how the community is all tied together. That's a hard sell for corporations. Don't want to just give out money, but that's going to be the key here. I don't think it's going to be fan rounding up. I don't think it's going to be fans sending $10 that's going to save the world here. But Scott said some interesting stuff though early on. 2,900 people for Iowa. Maybe that's not bad.
I don't know, Scott. Do you have a reference point to that? Do you know what that's like elsewhere?
Well, we did our survey, and we talked to a ton of collective people when we did that a couple of weeks. It's about a month and a half ago, where we did. And I talked to a couple. Everybody on our staff talked to a couple people connected with collectives, and the lying and the paranoia is just out of this world. We just do not know how many, and those people were more truthful because they didn't have their names or schools attached. But Iowa, I don't know, between 5 and 8-ish million, probably more closer to 5. Other schools are in the 2.5. Some are at 5, some are at 7, and some are saying 13, and it's more like 8. And so it's this notion that everybody feels like they're falling behind, and in reality, I talked to one. Yeah, I talked. This is funny. I talked to a rival of Iowa about basketball. I'll just leave it at rival, and I'll say that I was out in LA and I've been in other places, that they laughed at Fran saying 500,000, and they're like, even 200,000 would cover our whole backcourt. So, and that's a rival. That's a pretty good program. So the things that are getting thrown out there, and everybody's paranoid and everybody's worried. That's why I think when it goes in-house, it'll be fine. And then the blue bloods are going to get the blue bloods. I mean, Ohio State's going to get who they want. Michigan's going to get who they want. Iowa, you're going to have to compete with Wisconsin, the three polar bears, over one sheet of ice in Chicagoland, although Michigan State has kind of been on the bottom floor for a little while when it comes to that. And Wisconsin's kind of sucking there too. But yeah, but it's, that's really what this is going to be all about. And
it'll probably be market correction, right? It'll kind of just be what it used to be in terms of the haves and the have-nots. It's just going to be more separation now that you're going Power 5 to Power 4. I worry about those, American Conference teams and some of those lower FBS level teams being able to survive this. I think they're going to be the ones that get the axe. And everybody, I mean, the Big Ten teams are fine. Mm-hmm. These media rights deal, they're going to be fine. They'll figure it out. It's the smaller schools. Even you didn't even get to the FCS level. You wonder about the future for like Northern Iowa, Mark's alma mater, or Western Illinois, your alma mater. You just never know.
They're dead in the water. There's no doubt about that. But even like the Big 12. I mean, the money that they get, in Iowa State versus now, there is a difference, and say like this year, which could be the even greater discussion point in the state of Iowa than Caitlyn Clark could be if, let's say, Iowa State comes to Iowa and wins, or Iowa wins, and Iowa finishes 10-2, but gets left out of the playoff, but Iowa State finishes 10-2 and wins the Big 12. It not only gets to get to the playoff, it gets to host, or it gets to a top 4 spot. So it gets a bye. So Iowa could be like, we're better than Iowa State. And they're like, who cares? We're, and they could have triple the number of amount of money that Iowa State has for this, and it still won't matter. So look forward to that discussion in, November, December.
Hey,
cooler heads will prevail.
Since I've got here, I have a neighbor who is a Florida State grad. She keeps telling me Florida State and Clemson going to the Big Ten. Where are they going to go?
I don't know, because
they're going to go somewhere, right? Am I wrong?
I think there's a couple of options. The one that, to me, that kind of stands out is I could see the ACC saying, basically imploding and then coming back together as a smaller unit. Because if you're Florida State and Clemson, do you bring anything to the SEC that the SEC doesn't already have? You do to the Big Ten, but does the Big Ten really want to go there? And then you have the AAU stuff, and fans are going to be, president's going to be leery of that. But if they were to say, let's just implode and pick the best 8 schools, Virginia Tech, a Florida State, a Clemson, North Carolina State, take, the rest, Virginia, and make it a smaller unit, you probably make the same amount of money. And then you shed yourself of that dead weight. And then you still got a playoff berth. I mean, that's the way to go. If you're asking me, instead of, now 17 schools, Stanford and Cal and SMU and Boston College and Wake Forest. I mean, that's too many mouths to feed if you're the ACC.
Yeah. To me, there's really SEC and Big Ten, and, if you
and Notre Dame
there, then Big 12, maybe.
SEC, Big Ten, and Notre Dame.
Shit. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, fellas. I think we've run this thing out as long as we're going to run it. Mark, we apologize for keeping you for 2 hours.
Oh, it's all good. I had a great time.
This is in honor of the On Iowa pod, which used to run forever.
Yeah.
Always great talking to you guys.
Yeah.
We wish you the best.
Anytime you need some sort of nonsense, you're killing the cool horse latitudes, give me a call.
We will do that, and we need to get up to visit Mark at the dispensary. Scott and I'll have to take a road trip up there.
Hey, I just don't drive afterward. You're going to be all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll just come out to your place in the woods.
Yeah,
I haven't had Ed come by yet, but when he does, man, yeah,
take a picture.
All right, folks, we appreciate everybody tuning in to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Scott and I will be back next week to talk some more about horses, right? Latitudes, horses, all that stuff next week. No, there'll be stuff to talk about. There always is. Thank you to Mark Morehouse for joining us in this podcast. Appreciate everybody listening. A special thanks to our sponsors, and we will talk to you guys again soon. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.